State Representative Brian Harrison of Waxahachie, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. We all know about Governor Abbott's executive order essentially banning a COVID-19 vaccine mandate. What is your position on that? Going into now your first week of the job.
That's right. Was sworn in just yesterday. And, I was very excited to see the governor, take some bold action here. I think it's time that states, and particularly freedom-loving states like Texas, take bold action and stand up to this unconstitutional government overreach that's coming out of the Biden administration, especially with regards to these COVID-19 vaccine mandates. I mean, look, I know COVID-19 is bad, it's dangerous, but I tell you what, it's nowhere near as bad and as concerning to me as a potential loss of liberty and freedoms that we're seeing coming out as a result of these mandates. I mean, I was there in the Trump administration as the chief of staff of the Department of Health and Human Services at the beginning of the standing up of Operation Warp Speed. I believe that program saved countless lives, but it was always from the very beginning supposed to be a voluntary program. We wanted enough vaccines for every American who wanted to take it and who wanted to take it by choice.
And yesterday I spoke with a Fort Worth businessman who's conservative. He doesn't like mandates one way or the other. And his thought was, why should the government tell me either way I can or I can't, do something as a private business person?
Yeah, and it's a good question, and it's something I'm very sensitive to as a very, very small government guy myself. But this is something that is not happening in a vacuum here. Right now, we have the federal government coming in and ordering businesses in the state of Texas, ordering individuals in the state of Texas, people who should be free Texans, to get vaccinated, in many cases against their will. So this is hardly happening in a vacuum. And I think we absolutely need legislation like the bill that I filed yesterday, which really does two things. One, it's the most comprehensive ban on all COVID mandates. And it does a second thing, which is I think equally important, which is it sort of asserts Texas's sovereignty and free Texans' authority and bodily autonomy in advance of the almost certain imminent regulations coming out of the Department of Labor. I mean, President Biden has promised that he is going to use the power of the federal government to force vaccine mandates on free Texans. So we have to do something that stands up and that pushes back against that.
And so what exactly would how would your bill work? And there is a mechanism in there that would allow employees to sue their employers?
No, not to sue their employers. What my bill does, it's actually pretty simple. It does a couple things that are, I think, very common sense, and I think will be very overwhelmingly popular. One, it's a very comprehensive COVID mandate ban. It very simply says no person can force or coerce any other person in the state of Texas to receive a vaccine if it's against their wishes. And then what we do is we tweak slightly our Texas's informed consent statute. Like, informed consent, for folks who aren't familiar, is a bedrock principle in healthcare in every one of the 50 states and in the federal government, which basically says no healthcare provider can subject an individual to a medical procedure or treatment without that individual, the patient's informed consent, basically giving permission to do so. And what we simply say is, if you have been coerced as a Texan into receiving a vaccine against your will, then you cannot actually provide that informed consent. And then we say that if a provider or somebody vaccinates an individual, a Texan, who has not provided informed consent, which, by the way, I don't think any doctor in the state of Texas, would do. They're all very used to having to get informed consent before they treat a patient. They would be liable for damages. And then we have a provision that basically prevents punishment for any Texan who simply chooses not to provide informed consent to receive a vaccine against their will.
So who would be held liable under this?
It would be anybody who actually forcibly vaccinated another Texan.
So that could be a business.
No, I mean, I think it's very unlikely that a business is going to forcibly stick a needle into one of their employees' arms. Where this would be talking about people who are appropriately licensed in the state of Texas to provide healthcare services, including treatments such as the COVID-19 vaccination.
So healthcare providers, then a nurse, as an individual or a practice, could be held liable.
It could be, but again, it's really almost inconceivable. I've worked in and out of healthcare policy for a very long time and around doctors and nurses and all types of healthcare providers. These are individuals who care about their patients and who, by the way, are extremely used to and accustomed to never providing a procedure or a treatment without getting informed consent. So this really just codifies existing practice and existing informed consent practices all across the federal government. I'm sorry, all across the United States.
Two other questions for you.
Yeah.
And first is, I was talking with State Senator Nathan Johnson today, who opposes the governor's executive order. And his thought was to, for both the federal and state governments, would be to have people tested each week, and they would be exempt if they got the vaccine. What's your thought about that?
Well, look, I mean, testing is certainly far less intrusive onto somebody's, liberty and autonomy than is a COVID mandate. But my bill and the focus of my efforts right here is to do two things: protect Texans from being forcibly vaccinated against their will, and then number two, and this is the thing that's really important here. This is the boldest assertion of liberty and freedom against the impending federal government mandate. States like Texas have got to lead the way in pushing back against these mandates that the president has, unfortunately, and in an unprecedented way, promised he is going to do to the state. So this would be the boldest assertion of liberty, the biggest protection against COVID-19 mandates in the entirety of the United States. And Texas, I'm very proud to be playing a role in Texas asserting itself, leading the other states and pushing back against this unconstitutional overreach of federal government power, because they've stopped, I think, anymore. They're doing this under the context of protecting public health. That's not what's going on here. This is about power. This is about coercion. This is about control of a federal government that is far overreaching its constitutional limits. And states like Texas must stand up. We must lead the nation in pushing back and protecting the liberty of free Texans here. And I'm proud to be a part of this, and I'm proud to be pushing this bill here through the legislature, even on my first day.
And my last question to you, I know there is another bill that's being given a hearing shortly, House Bill 155. Not sure if yours has been is going to get a hearing just yet, but is that a bill that you would support, and how does it differ from yours?
Yes, I've spoken at great length with the representative introducing that bill, and I do have good news. My bill was actually around 3:30 in the morning. It was referred to a committee, so the bill is moving. I'm very excited to report that. And look, I support every effort at pushing back against these unconstitutional and tyrannical vaccine mandates. His is much more workplace specific. It involves broadening of exemptions, something I also support. But my bill is written in a much more comprehensive way. It's a statute of general applicability. It's not talking about workplace specific, sector specific. This is very simple, very high level. No individual in the state of Texas can force another individual to receive a mandate. And it's written in such a way as to protect Texans from the unconstitutional mandate that unfortunately President Biden has promised is coming down the pipe.
State Representative Brian Harrison, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your insight. Thank you.